Hey everyone, week 5, how you doing? We're continuing on with chapter 2, which is that chapter titled A Taxonomy of Significant Learning. And we're going to be continuing on exploring Fink's new taxonomy. So, the next step in understanding the value and meaning of Fink's taxonomy is to relate it more broadly to the literature on college teaching. Researchers and practitioners have written extensively about what students should learn and about how to teach so students learn something significant. One of the tests of any taxonomy is how well it interprets and makes sense out of this literature. So, the first kind of significant learning is foundational knowledge. The basic meaning of this kind of learning is understanding and remembering. And this kind of lines up with the knowledge section of Bloom's. Any sustained effort to learn about any topic, subject, or activity will almost inevitably require students to acquire a basic understanding of particular data, concepts, relationships, and perspectives, as well as the ability to recall this knowledge in the future. And there's going to be some things that we want students to know. Be able to name bones of the upper extremity. Be able to name or describe the muscles of the thigh. That's all very important. Be able to describe the brachial plexus and name each section. So that is important, that foundational knowledge. Next up is application. After foundational knowledge, application learning is probably the most common educational goal for many college teachers. We want students to be able to apply what they've learned. They have learned, let's say, different special tests for evaluating the shoulder. Now apply those tests. Be able to do them. And we as faculty members, we want students to learn how to use the knowledge in some way. Fink notes that knowledge can be used in multiple ways, which is why this category of significant learning has multiple meanings. As used here, application or using foundational knowledge includes developing particular skills, learning how to manage complex projects, and developing the ability to engage in various kinds of thinking. So, skills. Well, physical therapy skills, occupational therapy skills, nursing skills, whatever they may be. When teachers say they want students to learn how to use some particular knowledge, they are sometimes referring to students learning how to develop a skill of some kind. That is, the ability to engage in a particular kind of action. Sometimes this skill has a significant physical component associated with it. For example, anyone who learns how to play the piano must pick up a certain amount of foundational knowledge, notes, scales, harmonies, and so forth. But at some point, new pianists must learn how to use their arms, hands, feet, and fingers to make the instrument create music. Same thing when learning to do a musculoskeletal examination. You need to know how to do the tests, what they are for, but you also need to develop your positioning, how you hold yourself, where you hold yourself, how you hold the patient. These are the skills. Managing complex projects. This is another kind of application. It's the ability to manage complex projects. Similar to the use of a skill, this activity also has criteria associated with high quality performance. But what distinguishes this activity from other forms of application learning is the complexity of the activity. This complexity requires students to learn how to organize and coordinate several tasks as part of one major project. Next, the general concept of thinking, a third and very important kind of application. Few topics have received more attention in the literature on this topic in the realm of college teaching. Almost every teacher who talks at length about educational goals will eventually say, in one way or another, I want my students to learn how to think. And that's what we want them to do with patients, correct? We want them to be able to evaluate. We want them to problem solve. Okay, this piece of equipment isn't working for the patient as an ambulation device. Is there another way that we can modify it? So, learning how to think, very important. Critical thinking. When college teachers want their students to learn how to analyze and evaluate something, they have critical thinking as the goal. And so do we. We want people to analyze, correct, and evaluate. We want them to perform a test and understand the meaning in the context to all the other aspects of that patient. Right, if we have somebody do a test for their knee and they have pain, how do we compare that to other tests that were positive or negative? So the purpose of this exhibit here is to illustrate different forms of thinking, questions designed to prompt the three kinds of thinking. We haven't looked at creative or practical thinking yet. For example, in biology, critical thinking is to evaluate the validity of the bacterial theory of ulcers. Creative thinking is to design an experiment to test the bacterial theory of ulcers. And practical thinking is how would the bacterial theory of ulcers change conventional treatment regimens? So, what is creative thinking? We saw an example there. Creative thinking, people who teach, we're wanting them to have this. We're wanting them to develop this. Example, Fink gives in the humanities. People who teach in the humanities are accustomed to encouraging their students to engage in creative thinking. In applied courses in the humanities, teachers help their students find new forms and styles for expressing themselves via painting, writing, music, and so forth. Even in non applied courses, teachers are often trying to get students to find new interpretations of existing works. Creative thinking is also found in the social and natural sciences, maybe where we spend more time, definitely where we spend more time, when teachers want their students to think outside the box, to find new ways of answering questions, to develop new perspectives on the phenomena being studied, or to devise new solutions to old problems. They are urging students to engage in creative thinking. Practical thinking, third kind of thinking, means students are learning how to answer questions, make decisions, and solve problems. This is what we are doing when we ask students to engage in problem solving or decision making exercises. So, now moving on to the next category, integration, the third realm of significant learning. This is when students learn how to connect and relate various things to each other. One of the many examples that might be mentioned, Fink notes, three major kinds of connections that many educators have emphasized are interdisciplinary learning, learning communities, and connecting academic work with other areas of life. Definitely big for us is interdisciplinary practice. So, what is interdisciplinary learning? Well, teachers have long been interested in the goal of interdisciplinary learning, although recognizing the obvious need to continue learning about individual disciplines. A number of scholars have noted that most of the world's big problems are bigger than one single discipline. So, interdisciplinary teaching and learning is accomplished by one teacher in one course who presents the perspectives of two or more disciplines to the class. At other times, educators use team teaching or coordinated classes or interdisciplinary programs. And you're seeing this more and more in healthcare education programs, that interdisciplinary approach. Sometimes it may be a guest lecture or a lab where PTs and OTs collaborate together, working with a kind of a role playing stroke patient or TBI patient, something like that. Other times they're kind of more formal things like a grand rounds or case examples where you're trying to get everybody to provide input on a particular topic so everybody's getting an opportunity to learn from each other. It can take other forms too. What are you familiar with? What have you seen? I would think another way of doing interdisciplinary learning could be where engineering students work with kinesiology students to explore something in a motion capture lab. Or how do psychology students work with those students in criminal justice? Learning communities, another closely related activity that has gathered strong interest since the 1990s, is the creation of learning communities. This activity is also has the general goal of helping students learn how to integrate different perspectives, but focuses on the strategy of connecting diverse people as well as diverse disciplines. These programs search for ways of creating new kinds of interactions among faculty, students, staff, and sometimes off campus people, done in a variety of ways, creating different residential arrangements, linking courses so that students take a set of courses together, often with team teaching, and bringing in outside people to do something with students on campus or sending students off campus to work with people in other contexts and environments. So, a third closely related realm of educational effort has been in the direction of connecting what students learn in their academic work with other areas in their lives. These other areas often include students' work, but also extend to students' personal and social lives. When teachers have students interview older family members to learn via oral history, the students are learning how to gather information about history from a new source. But they are also developing a connection between the history they are studying in class and their own family life. When professors in pre professional programs have students shadow professionals, do internships, or work in real life settings while taking courses, the curriculum is intended to help students build connections between what they are learning in class and what they are or will be doing in the workplace. Let's take a look at the human dimension now. The fourth kind of significant learning addresses the important relationships and interactions we all have with ourselves and with others. When we learn how to fulfill these relationships in positive ways and how to honor and advance those relationships, we learn something very important. College students frequently report that learning about themselves and about others is among the most significant experiences they have during college. So, learning about self. When we learn about ourselves, we might learn something that helps us understand who we are at the present time. This kind of learning changes or informs our self image. At other times, we might learn something new about the person we want to become. This gives us a new self ideal. Both are important and either may happen intentionally or as a byproduct of the formal aspects of our education. Next, under this fourth domain, is the journey toward self authorship. It's been postulated that an educational goal for all college teachers that is both powerful and valid within this kind of significant learning is to assist students on their journey towards self authorship. So, can we help students do that? It's a good question. Helping them to identify their beliefs, identities, and relationships, that is progressing towards self-authorship. I think through our rigorous academic programs, through the interactions that we have with students and their fellow classmates, and through their clinical work, they develop this a little bit. It's hard to engage in all of it, but again, this is more of an undergraduate theme. Learning about others, sometimes our educational experiences enable us to better understand and interact with other people. For example, at the University of Oklahoma, several professors are now using small groups with team-based learning in their classes. In one of these classes, a student team included an East Asian student. The group soon realized that this student was getting high scores on his individual tests, but was often not volunteering his answers when they took the same test as a group. When they asked why he didn't speak up and share his answers more freely, he replied, "In my culture, it is not polite to tell others they are wrong." After pondering this situation a while, the rest of the group decided on a new strategy when it came time to take the group test. They would start their discussions by asking this student what his answer was, and then go on to see what the rest of the group thought. That way, he wasn't forced to tell anyone they were wrong. So, other ways we can learn about others is through service learning, travel experiences, and getting out and doing volunteer work within your community. Usually, we are referring, when we talk about a broader concept of others, we're referring to other people when we speak of learning about others, but sometimes others extend to more than people. And this can be learning about other individuals and learning about animals, learning about our environment. Again, another concept here, really more focused at the undergraduate level. Again, we're still kind of working under exploring learning in the human dimension. So that's what we're talking about here with learning about self authorship, learning about others, and a broader concept of others. Then there's the human dimension of learning and emotional intelligence. This kind of learning Fink refers to under the label of human dimension of learning as emotional intelligence. Goleman identified several different competencies having to do with oneself, which is personal competence, and one's interaction with others, which is social competence. And so I think we develop some of these with our students: empathy, awareness of others' feelings and needs, social skills. Definitely social competence, I think, is something we develop maybe more so than personal competence. Next up, here under the human dimension, still the reciprocity of learning about self and others. So, with this here, there's a relationship. One learns about oneself, and as one learns about oneself, they are also learning about others, or vice versa. This means if you, as the teacher, can work on one kind of learning in the course, it will likely help both kinds of learning, learning about self, learning about others. Here in Exhibit 2.2, one can see the reciprocity in the list of major educational goals: building character, learning how to interact with people different from oneself, leadership, ethics, learning how to work effectively as a member of a team, citizenship, serving others, international awareness, and more. What Fink's trying to get across here is that as students learn about themselves, they're going to learn about others, and vice versa. As they learn about others, that'll help them learn more about themselves. Caring is next up. This is the fifth kind of significant learning. Does somebody care about learning? What can we do to help them care about the process? And as they learn, how does that change their ability to care? When Fink talks with students about how they feel about a particular course or with teachers or about teachers, they often get the following kind of comments like I enjoyed coming to class, I like looking through microscopes, I find it fascinating to learn about why people do what they do. These statements indicate students have developed certain feelings associated with a particular subject or learning experience, that certain interests have emerged, and that various values have become important for them. Whenever any of these happen, students have come to care differently about something, and when students care, they have a different affective response. So let's take a look at the focus of caring. When thinking about caring as an educational goal, it's important to remember that students can come to care about several possible foci for learning. As a result of their learning experiences, student might care more or differently about each of these. The phenomena being studied, the ideas studied, their own self, others that they encounter, and the process of learning itself. The sixth kind of significant learning is learning how to learn, and that is the lifelong learning that we're talking about. And hopefully, we're teaching people how to become better students, learning how to construct knowledge in different domains of inquiry, and learning how to be a self directing learner. So, looking at learning how to be a better student now, somebody can become a better student by doing these things, developing their underlying concept of learning or of knowledge itself, develop metacognitive awareness so that they recognize that a deep approach is required, and metacognitive control so that they can make appropriate meaning making moves, provide the space and freedom to have time to explore personal interests, make assessment demands explicit so that students understand that only full understanding will be acceptable as a learning outcome, and change teaching methods to make learning more active and interactive. A second general meaning of learning how to learn is helping students learn how to add to their old knowledge in ways that are specific to particular domains of inquiry. This is why students need to learn about the scientific method, literary analysis, and so on. The nature of knowledge in each of these domains is different, and therefore how one adds to that knowledge, whether publicly or personally, is also distinct. Educationally, that means we need to help students learn what those differences are and how to at least continue adding to their own personal knowledge in each domain. Now, learning how to be a self directing learner, all right, somebody who wants to go out and learn, a self directing learner, that individual uses self directed learning to have personal autonomy. And in the student role, that self managed learning is crucial for ultimate success in the classroom. What we can do to promote self directed learning is make use of a learner's existing knowledge structure, encourage deep level learning, increase questioning by the learners, develop the critical thinking capabilities of the learners, enhance their reading skills, and enhance their comprehensive monitoring. Okay, so paradigm shift now. Back to the categories here. Fink's categories: learning how to learn, carrying human dimension, integration, application, and foundational knowledge. Do we like Fink's or do we prefer Bloom's? With Fink's, you really have to think about things. You have to think about things in a different way. And maybe strive to have kind of a transformational experience within your class. When you're having a learning centered approach, you're pushing learning into each of these multiple directions of learning. If it's a content centered paradigm, you're really focused around foundational knowledge and maybe application. Now, in the rest of the chapter, there's kind of a focus, again, more of the undergraduate stuff, the need for long term view of learning. And again, I think our students are different in the way that they come to us. Maybe this is more of a focus for undergrad, so I'm not going to go into this as much here. We want significant learning to occur. As faculty, we want to feel like we're facilitating that. But I think the challenge often is we only have so much time. They have a lot of classes that they're taking, and we want them to become competent. We want them to be safe and ethical. This last section here highlights faculty dreams, what they would like their students to be able to do. If you want to read through this, please help yourself. The question posed here, does the learning-centered paradigm abandon content? And the answer is no, it definitely does not. It just makes you think differently about how you deliver that content. How do we achieve significant learning? Well, when it all comes down to it, the learning is still going to be assessed. You need to assess what they have done. And if your assessment is integrated with the different domains here, then you'll be able to see if you were able to achieve that significant learning via Fink's model.